Hello there, everyone. We've got two bald people on the screen, or two lesser-haired folks. Uh, Charles Hamaker here with you from Circling Seattle Sports, along with Darren Brown from Sound of Hockey. I did my best walk and talk intro. Was that all right?
It sounded akin to a walk and talk intro. I appreciate that.
Darren and I are here to talk about the PWHL Takeover Tour game in Seattle at Climate Pledge Arena as the Boston Fleet took the shootout win over the Montreal Victoire, 3-2. Just obviously a historic game, for Seattle to host this. Um, as the PWHL looks at a bunch of different sites with this takeover tour for potential expansion, as I look to add two teams for the upcoming season. But the game itself was incredible. So Darren, just what before we get into some other things, obviously Seattle was really excited. The crowd was really excited when the Jocks and Jills podcast mentioned wanting a team here. But the game itself, I mean, this was just good hockey. The hope is always with an event like this, a neutral site game is to have good competition. And, this we got that obviously with this going to a shootout. What did you think about the game itself?
Yeah, it was a great game, and Boston fell behind 2-0 early. Technically, it was a home game for them. They were considered the home team. I don't know. It was a fairly split crowd, I thought, but yeah, it was fun to watch. They were down 2-0 after the first period. They slowly battled back, chipped away. The overtime was fun to watch. The shootout was fun to watch, and they had a great opportunity on Ann-Renée Debian with 1.2 seconds left or something like that. She made an awesome save. So some awesome saves in the game also from Aaron Frankel and Ann-Renée Debian, two superstar goalies in the women's game. So it was all in all, it was a very, very fun day. I thought I really enjoyed the experience. And seeing 12,000 plus fans show up for two random teams that aren't even based in Seattle. That kind of a turnout and that kind of level of support, I think, from the Seattle fans was pretty cool to see. So a good day for women's sports in general, and just a nice celebration of women's hockey, I thought. So it was a great experience. I was happy to be part of it.
Absolutely. I mean, and especially considering the crowd that came out for the rivalry series game back in, I believe it was November of 22. I was really hoping to see a solid turnout, and the lower bowl was pretty well packed. There were folks even in the seats behind the press box there. And I know
Yeah.
how those are less optimal viewing situations, just because I know a ton of hockey. I believe you guys have done a few different what's the best seat at Climate Pledge Arena pieces, and that yeah, those aren't the greatest seats. So when I was walking, I was really surprised to see that. But yeah, no, I mean the amount of talent on these teams, just with obviously in the two captains, Marie-Philippe Poulin and Hillary Knight, the goaltenders. It was you had a lot going on. There were power play goals. Um, we had like you said that sequence towards the end where Ann-Renée Debian had to make that save. I really thought that Boston was going to score, at the end of that game as they got a power play at the end of regulation with I think 12 seconds left. Um Carrying that into the overtime and then even some chances in the extra period. But yeah, you go to the shootout. Hannah Brandt, Hannah Bilka, and Susanna Tapani all score. Marie-Philippe Poulin, the only one to convert for Victoire. Um, just pretty remarkable. Do you have a player of the game, someone who stood
Oh, I
out to
didn't
you?
answer that. I'm sorry. I would say either Tapani or Bilka. I think Tapani really was the deciding factor in the game. She had the tying goal, and then the winning goal in the shootout. And Bilka too, though. It's kind of cool to see one of the up and comer kind of players. She's 23. Probably has a future with Team USA. So fun to see her factor in that way too. And she's a great player. So a lot of skill there. Again, as you said, really fun to see that showcase today in a big way.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And coming into this one, I have to apologize. I don't know which team from the PWHL that you would watch the most coming into this, but I had watched a lot of Boston, and their offense has struggled. Their offense has struggled last year, and they really only make the Walter Cup last year because of the play of Aaron Frankel and net, and that's kind of how it's been this year for them. So for them to get Anna Bilka, I believe through the draft, yeah, in his first season in the league, and already be one of your top producers, be a difference maker and named first star in this one. Um, I'm sure they'll happy with that, and hopefully for Boston, this is a game that turns things around for them because coming into this, when you talk about two random teams, it was also a team at the top of the standings and the bottom of the standing. They're not necessarily two of the best going at it, but you get a lot of good talent when you're only a six-team league currently, right? So
Yeah.
um, that leads you. We'll get away from the game itself. To Seattle's fit for expansion. I know. I believe it was John Barr, over with another bald over at Sound of Hockey, put
We have
out
a lot of
his
them.
thoughts on it. Yeah, you're stockpiling it.
Yeah, we're a pro bald hockey outlet for sure.
Jesus. Meanwhile, I've only got me. So what does that say about me? Um, you know, it's always fascinating to me because with what we do at Circling Seattle Sports, obviously we've got the Kraken, and that's how I know you. But someone who's been on the ground for Storm stuff, for Seattle Rain. I've seen some of the different women, how the city supports the women's sports, right? And um, I was talking to some of the officials for the PWHL actually, I think during the second intermission, and they're like, how do you compare this crowd, to what you've seen? And someone who my 4 years, 3, 4 years covering the Storm, I've been really lucky. I got Sue Birds last year when they, went to the playoffs and were a good team. 2 years ago, where they, were essentially a lottery team, which, not so great. But last year, they're another top of the league team and pushed for and made the playoffs. Um, Through all three of those seasons, though, uh, the Storm crowd's always been great. They bring the energy. Even some nights, I'll look up from my seat in the press area and I'll say, "Wow, it's kind of a lower attended game." They still bring the energy. And Nneka Ogwumike, who signed with the Sparks, one of the greatest players in the WNBA, it was the last game of that season 2 years ago that I mentioned, and both teams were well out of it. Both teams were lottery teams, bottom of the standings. They had nothing to play for in the last game of the year. But Agumake said it felt like a playoff atmosphere, and she was confused by that. So I I'm not surprised to see this support, but I thought Seattle did a good job today in this one. And obviously it's a but it there are some uh contrasting points as well. It's a crowded sports city. Would they share facilities? I don't know. There's a lot that goes into it. What do you think about Seattle's fit for expansion, at least in this current moment? Because it come down the line as well.
Yeah. It's interesting. I know that they're being truly considered. Like, I think that that is happening. They're being considered for soon, like for an early round of expansion here for the PWHL. Whether it's now or down the line, I don't know whether there's a perfect timing or a perfect fit for it either way.
Mm.
We talked about it earlier today, Charles, that going this far west at this point in time for the
Yes.
PWHL feels a little odd to me, only because right now the farthest west team is in Minnesota, right? So that's a long way to travel for a league that's mostly kind of in like little pods right now. So maybe you put the other expansion team in Vancouver or Calgary or even I guess Denver could maybe make sense. But it is a little far-fetched, I think, from that standpoint. But then to me, the biggest challenge is the arena. Like, I know that today they were able to largely fill Climate Pledge Arena. That's not going to happen every time. It's going to feel pretty empty at times for a PWHL game. So, and that's not a great experience, great environment for the players, I don't think. And I also don't think it's ideal to have them play in the junior arenas, right?
Yeah.
Those are the right size of arena that I think you want, but I don't think you want them playing in Everett, which is so far north, or even Kent, which is so far south. Especially not long term, right? I think you can have them play some games in those buildings to try to find some new audiences and things like that. But you really, if client pledge were a little smaller, or if even KCI Kraken Community Iceplex were bigger in capacity, that could be a fit. But neither of those is true. So I don't know, and there's no long term solution to that either, unless maybe UW one day gets a college team and they build a
Mm.
college sized facility. That would be a good solution. They could play in that building. But there's nothing like that I know of on the radar. And I even, did a story on that last year that there's
Yes.
nothing imminent there. So I don't know. I think that there is an appetite for it from different people that are involved in this thing. I think that the people that support women's sports would absolutely support them. Whether or not it makes perfect sense, I would say no, but I'd also like to see it happen. I've been a fan of women's hockey for a long time, so it would be cool to see it happen. Is it a perfect fit? I'm not sold that it's a perfect fit.
Yeah, and that's just the reality of it, right? Because that's an arena is the biggest thing so much, and that obviously goes to the NBA and expansion for the longest time, right? Was the arena obviously climate pledge is here now, and so that's a whole other debate. But yeah, I think John also floated the potential like the I keep forgetting that they're building a rink out in is it shoot help me out here. Is it the one in is like in Linwood? I think it's somewhere up
Uh,
north.
well,
There's
there's like a plan for one. I don't know if they've really started moving with that yet,
yeah, but
but
that there's like I
I
don't
don't
know.
take that to be like a larger capacity arena. I always
No,
envisioned
but the
that.
potential of, if they're like, hey, if you are going to build something here, then we will grant you that expansion. Yeah, no, there's ways you could. That's like a more funky idea that I
Yeah.
might have
No,
had.
you're right though. But see, I always took that to be like, the arenas, the rinks in the neighborhood in the area are at capacity for just people wanting to play hockey
Yeah,
and skate. So I
yeah.
took that as they're going to add some more sheets of ice to the area. Now, maybe if they end up having another team to support that needs some capacity, maybe they build that in, make it more of a venue like that. But I don't know that there's any kind of plans like that. So
Yeah.
I think that they would, if they were to actually get an expansion team, I think it would be working with what they have and kind of making the most of it.
Hmm.
Again, I just don't think it's quite ideal, but yeah, that's kind of my take on it. I don't know. We'll see what
Well,
happens. I think we're probably going to have this answer relatively quickly because I think the PWHL is planning to expand within the next year, if I'm not mistaken, right? To add a couple more teams. So we'll know the answer if Seattle's one of those teams.
yeah, and not to hammer it too much, but covering the rain too, the rain playing in Lumen Field, they will have the solid. I think the consistent number of attendance was 8 to 10,000, and that
Hmm.
is a venue that can host like 60 plus. So, it's that takes away from the atmosphere as well, right? When you've got everyone on one side of the field, and don't get me
Totally.
wrong, I mean there are the diehards. It's very much like the Seawolves in Kent. They fill out Starfire Stadium, and I've heard rumors that they want to move to Memorial Stadium when the Oakview group redoes that venue. Um, but yeah, I don't know how well they'd fill things out. So yeah, I mean, it could be a situation like the Rain currently, where they just kind of go with it. But to your point, there is the other hurdle of just being the one team out west, right?
Hmm.
So yeah, no, I mean they're clear and obvious hurdles, but I'm sure that if the right ownership group was in place, they'd do whatever they could to handle that sort of thing. Yeah, so this is also something that we talked about today at the game. The PWHL obviously has a few different rules that are different from the NHL. I wanted to ask you, what would you know, I don't know if you'd like is the right word. What would you be interested to see rules wise implemented in the NHL, just to change things up or see how it would play out with the current landscape of the league? Obviously, there's the jailbreak rule. There's the rule that's new this year with having the players who committed the penalties stay on the ice. What would you like to see? Toyed with, played with, implemented into the NHL from the PWHL rules.
I'd be curious to see that one that you just mentioned where they have to stay on the ice. So if your team commits a penalty, you have to stay out there at least start the penalty kill. I think that's a really interesting rule that kind of inherently creates some additional offense because if you think about it, when you commit a penalty or your team commits a penalty, in a lot of scenarios, your team is tired, right? You've been chasing the game, you're chasing the puck around your defensive zone, something like that. You stop moving your feet, you get your stick up in somebody's armpit, and all of a sudden you get called for a penalty. So that's how penalties happen a lot of times is when you're getting pinned into your own zone, you're long on a shift, you're starting to get tired, things like that. That's when penalties tend to happen. So then now if you take a penalty and then those players who are already on tired legs have to stay out for at least, and theoretically you're staying out for another 15, 20, 30 seconds, depending on what happens on that face off. that does change the complexion a little bit of the power play. The thing that's a little tricky about it, and you and I have watched a lot of Kraken practices where the amount of time that they spend with their guys that specialize in power play and
Mm,
penalty kill, it takes a little bit of that away, right? Because now everyone has to know how to kill penalties. I think they kind of do anyway. If they get to this level at some point, they've been taught how to kill penalties probably. But I mean, you have people that are like really specialized in being able to kill penalties. It's even part of how they sign and trade for players, right? Is they determine, oh, well, they're really good on penalty kill, they're really good on the power play, things like that. They can really help in this aspect of our team. Now, if that's not so much of a factor, it totally changes things. So I think it would be something they'd have to gradually phase in,
mm.
maybe make it, try it out in the AHL, see how it goes, and continue or consider bringing it up to the NHL eventually. But it is a really intriguing rule. I think there were 2 goals that were scored today off power plays where the team that was defending didn't get a change before the goal happened, I believe. So that's kind of case in point that it almost automatically would create some additional offense, additional power play goals. The other one, I know that there's an anti-tanking rule that they've constructed, and I don't quite fully understand it, but it's something like if you're out of the playoffs, and then once you're mathematically eliminated, then you have to like win your games and you start gaining traction towards a top pick. I think that's pretty interesting because tanking is definitely a thing in the NHL. I know that there's lottery, the whole lottery system and everything, but teams still go for it, right? Because even if you lose that lottery, your chances of being in the top 5 are great if you have a terrible season. So those are a couple things I'd maybe at least consider how they work in the NHL. I don't know. I mean, it is a very different game. Having watched an NHL game last night, a PWHL game today, very very different. There's so much more time and space in the women's game, but they play in a different way also. Like the 3-on-3 overtime, when you think about how the NHL does it, it's so much looping back and supporting each other and drop
Yep.
passes and crossing and dropping. Today in the 3-on-3, it was like they'd get the puck and they just push it up. And that goes with having that extra time and space where it's like, okay, there's 50 feet open for me to take. I'm going to take it. And they would just do that. Whereas again, in the NHL, it's circling back. It's all about puck control. So they're on to something with a few of those rule changes. I think it's really interesting. I think it's exciting stuff. Whether or not the NHL would ever go for those couple rules that I just mentioned, I'm not sure. But it's intriguing at the very least.
Yeah, no, it's always kind of cool, and going back to my WNBA coverage, like the WNBA put in the Commissioner's Cup, the in-season tournament, and now the NBA has their own. I think it's really sponsored now, but at least like the Emirates Cup or something. So they've got that. It's always fascinating to watch that. The NWSL with the rain, they had a same sort of thing in season tournament, and so there's a trend there, and the MLS has a few of those as well. So it's always fascinating to see that one. Obviously, the NFL with the new kickoff rules, taking that from the UFL, XFL, whatever it is now. Yeah, no, it's always cool to see that, but obviously there are different sort of aspects that would uh, be part of bringing that in. So, Darren, I think a lot of the folks that follow us already follow Sound of Hockey, but is there anything that you guys have coming up that you like to plug, or just general Sound of Hockey things that you'd like to mention?
Yeah, I'd just say check us out if you haven't before. We have the Sound of Hockey podcast, which has been around for a long time. We're very much focused on the Kraken. It's been fun to talk about something a little different today. So thanks for having me on to do that, Charles. Charles, I would like to just remind your viewers that I was the one that gave you that name. So you've leaned into it. But
Yes.
yeah, check out soundofhockey.com. We're putting out new content very frequently. We have some awesome writers that do some really cool stuff over there. I had a fun story about, well, maybe it's not so fun, but Alex Stezka's
Oh yeah.
equipment got stolen from his vehicle during a call up in November. So I got the full scoop from him on that. So give that a read. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Follow us on social media at @sound_hockey. And I really appreciate you having me, Charles.
Yeah, well, and I'll get that story out of the way because it's not that long. At one of the Kraken practices, I think I was sitting. I walked up to Darren, or he walked up to me, and he goes, "You ever thought about going by just Charles? You dropped the ES." I was like, "No, I have not
I
thought
don't
about
even
that."
I don't know where it came
And
from either. It just came out of my mouth. I think I had been watching Formula One and I thought of Charles Leclerc.
uh,
I was like, hey, you ever consider going by just Charles. So
Yeah, no, and ever since then
yeah.
it's been my like username or display name on Twitter, and it's become sort of a thing. So yeah, no, and I've been around Darren for a while now, obviously with the Kraken coverage. John Barr's always been great. I saw Curtis today in his Boston Fleet jersey.
Yeah.
Blaze has been nice to meet as well this year. I was like, who is this guy? And I finally met Blaze. I was like, who? I always seen the name, but I'd seen the person. I hadn't done like connection. So
Yeah.
yeah, it was great to talk about it. So tomorrow we'll have the Devils to watch and we'll get back to Kraken hockey. So Darren, I
Indeed.
want to thank you for coming on, and until we see you next time, take care of yourselves, be well, and do whatever we can to make today a great day.